Good morning and welcome to CommsCamp. Today we are going to be covering insights. So we will be giving you some tools and some tricks and really just getting you thinking about how to use insights within your business. We have a guest speaker at the end. Today it's via audio, but most of our speakers will be video based. So we have the former head of insights at Ralph Lauren, which is a nice brand, and she will be giving some of her thoughts on insights as well. First of all, though, we're going to look at a few things. So we're going to start off with audience insights and discussing how you might be able to find those. We're then going to look at market insights, and obviously there is a bit of crossover there. So we'll be thinking about how you can use market insights to add to your intelligence. And then Shruti, who is the former head of insight at Ralph Lauren, talks about finding a golden egg. And that's what we're really looking for today, is how can you find the golden egg, which is maybe where your audience insights and your market insights interlink, and you find an amazing piece of data or insight that's really going to help you to build a purposeful campaign. So the takeaways from today, really looking for you to deepen the knowledge of your audience. And I think the people on the call today, there's lots of different levels of experience. So want to make sure that there's something here for everybody. If you're just getting started in insights, then hopefully today will give you some thoughts around how to start building out audience profiles. If you already have audience profiles, then I think this is a real opportunity to test what you've got and really try and go a bit deeper, take it another level forwards. The other thing to think about here as well is maybe building sub-audiences. So whether you have a new initiative, a new product or service, if you're in the third or the public sector, maybe there's a new message that you really want to deliver. And also, we're not going to focus heavily on the impact of COVID, but it has changed the world and it's changed the way that we communicate. So maybe due to COVID, some of your audience profiling has changed. So looking for you to really start thinking about your audience, think about the market insights as well. And ultimately, if you haven't got it already, help you to find that golden egg that Shruti will speak about later. We should have sent to everybody the diagnostic tool that we use. So it covers all 10 of our communications wheel areas. And this is just a quick snapshot of the insights part of this. There's 5 real questions there for you to think about. So you might want to do this after you've completed the rest of the worksheet we've provided. But what we're looking for you to really understand is, do you understand your position within the landscape? Do you understand your core audiences? Do you know what the competitors are doing? However, this isn't about copying at all. So we don't want to copy our competitors. We do want to understand them, and that might just help us to see where our organisation fits within that sector. I'm also looking at active listening tools so that you can monitor for opportunities, and then a sort of news and agenda scanning as well. So that's some of what we will be covering today. Starting with audience insights. So I would say you can never ever know enough about your audience. And even if you do, if you feel like you've really cracked it and you understand your audience, something's probably going to change the next day anyway, particularly at the moment, the way things are changing so fast. So I think this audience insight and audience profiling topic is something, no matter what organisation you're in, no matter how much data you have, you can always be building upon what you know about your audience group. Starting out then with some of the places that you might find audience insights. Obviously, depending on whether you are a B2B brand, whether you have a product or a service, whether you are direct to consumer, whether you maybe work in the public sector, or you might work in the third sector, you might have messages about health. There's loads of different things that you might be trying to communicate. So where you'll get your insights from will be quite different depending on your brand. A really good starting point, I always think, though, is to look at the adjacent markets to the industry that you're in. So to give you an example of that, if you are in the communications team for a solicitor's, maybe you could start thinking about the wider professional services industry. So if you're communicating out to an audience the services of the solicitors, you could maybe also look at what are accountants doing, because you might get some learnings from there around some best practice that you might be able to apply in a different way to your industry. So adjacent markets is a really good starting point. You might be able to source some customer data. So potentially you could look at the demographics of people that already buy from you. If you're a charity, you could look at who's already donating and what kind of backgrounds do they come from? How did you reach them in the first place? I would be cautious when I use customer data, because some brands might find that their actual customer that they should be going after isn't necessarily the type of customer they already have. So that's why it's really important to have lots of different data sets that you use for your audience insights. And it's also why it's so important to look at the market and not just the audience. So try and combine the two things to get a real clear picture. You could look at sales figures and you could look at sales data. I guess Tesco being a really good example of this with the club card. So they're able to tell at any point who's buying what, where, when, and really they have so much information about their customers. If you have an audience group already in place, you could survey them. That could be anything from a net promoter score, just to find out whether they would recommend your brand or not, or it could be something really quite detailed where you're asking them for feedback on a new product, for example. Going a step further, you could hold focus groups, and I think at the moment people are doing those via Zoom. So a focus group is a really good way to get the more qualitative insights, particularly if you maybe have quite a challenging topic and you want to get some first-hand data from people about it, or if you are maybe bringing a new product to market, a focus group can be a really good way to check in and get some feedback. Industry associations obviously have lots of audience insight, and then there's government data as well. So if you are a fuel poverty charity, then you could be looking at government data in relation to the cost of fuel and the issues that people might have in paying for their fuel. Charities in your sector could be another place to look, as could think tanks, research houses. So if you were to look at something like Kantar, if you have big budgets, you could buy a report from a Kantar or Nielsen. If you don't have the big budgets to be buying primary research, you could also just think about looking on their blogs and looking up some of their content, because they do give away a lot of the top line data in order to sell the more detailed report. So you can often access quite a lot of this research without actually having to pay for it. And Google, so Google has endless opportunities really in terms of your audience insights. On a really basic level, it's a great place just to find data and research just by typing in some well thought out queries into the keywords relating to your industry. You could also look at Google's AdWords to start to profile people and understand audiences better. You could use Google to look at sort of keyword search terms and something like Answer the Public, which would tell you what people are searching about something specific. And the same goes with Facebook. So Facebook can give you some really good analytics into groups of people. So it could be profiling those who are already engaged with your brand, or it could be going out and looking at a new sector and just trying to map those out. You could also look at commissioning primary research, competitive analysis we've talked about already, forums and social media, really good places to find insights about your audience. So if you have a product aimed at children, you might want to have a look on Mumsnet and try and find some threads where people are talking about maybe the problem that you solve. If you have a look on Twitter or Facebook, you could do a search for the types of things that you're trying to talk about and just try and get an understanding of what people are saying about that subject. And then finally, you could commission some paid research as well, maybe through YouGov, to try and just understand people's approach to the topic that you're trying to communicate. That's really a top level view, and I think each industry sector is going to have some really specific places that you can get audience insights from, but hopefully that gives you a starting list to think about. Thinking next about big data. So once you've got this research, what do you do with it? I think created this example here just to really show you that one size doesn't fit all. So the data needs to tell a story, and if you have big spreadsheets with lots of numbers in them, sometimes that story can get a little bit lost. So the example that I was trying to demonstrate here would be, we've got 4 columns there of numbers. Now, if you were to apply to each of those columns, what is the average of all of those columns is 15. If potentially that was the age of your customers, if you look at column A, having an average age of 15 is not really very helpful there, because actually the age group ranges from 1 all the way up till 30. If you look at column C and column E, that average age of 15 is actually really useful insight. So if your product's primarily being consumed by 15-year-olds, C and E, that's useful. And then if it was G, the average of 15 is not helpful because you don't have any 15-year-olds on that list and nobody's anywhere near the age of 15. But once you start to actually group that audience, then that could be quite helpful, because instead, if you were looking at 2 clear groups, you could segment your audience there and say we have an audience group of 3-year-olds and an audience group of 27-year-olds as an example. So I know this is potentially a little bit obvious, but I think sometimes you can't see the wood from the trees, especially when you are looking at data and big sets of data. It becomes much harder. So it's quite obvious there the way this data is ordered, and because we only have 30 numbers in each set. But once you start looking at huge big spreadsheets and applying things like averages, sometimes that doesn't really work. So thinking about how to use your audience insights, lots of different things that you could be doing there. Personas, I think, are coming back. It feels like personas were a really big thing a few years ago. And I think now people are really understanding the way that digital in particular means personas do work. So a persona could be creating an actual person. So you could call her Sally and you could talk about all of the different things that Sally enjoys doing. You could talk about what papers she reads and what social networks she's on. You could talk about what she does at the weekend, who she lives with, and so on. And having that persona can be a really helpful thing, so that you can then start to target your marketing at somebody that you can almost picture in your head. If you don't want to go as far as a persona, then you could look at an audience profile. So this would be when an organisation maybe says they're targeting 20 to 30-year-olds or over 65s, for example. You could look at geography, you could look at some of the sort of typical demographics, such as social class, and you could then start to build profiles of your types of customer that you want to reach, or your types of audience if you're not selling something. Then looking at segmentation. So segmentation might be to say that you have 3 really clear audience groups, and then you can break them down and you can think for different things that you might be communicating, who's the key segment that you're targeting there. Particularly maybe more for B2B, you might want to think about your dream customer. So this would be setting out, if you could choose your customer group, where would they come from? How much turnover would their organization have? What sector would they be in? And what problem maybe would they have? And that again lets you work backwards. And also a customer range. So again, you could say, my customers have this job title and they work for organizations earning between 10 million and 100 million pounds a year. And then quite a popular one at the moment is using some of the pay-per-click profiling opportunities to be able to map out your audiences. So using some of the tools that are out there on maybe Google or Facebook to try and get an understanding of the audiences, build out their profile from some basic demographics, and then start to take some of the insights available into their wider interests. So that can be a really useful start. And we really look at audience segments in two different directions. So on a horizontal level, so for example, Ross from Napier University, who I think is on the call today, at Napier, you might look at a demographic. So you might have this horizontal type of student. So maybe Napier is targeting a certain region of people, or maybe it's a certain age group that you're looking at. So having that demographic can be a really good horizontal segment. And then if you were B2B, maybe it's having people of a certain job title. So if you are communicating for some software, you might say your horizontal audience would be people who are head of IT and have that decision-making power. And then we look down the sides, we look at the vertical sectors. So going back to the university example, you'd have your demographics, but then you'd also have some specialist interests. So it may be that you find that medicine students have a really specific interest in something that they're much more likely to go mountaineering at the weekends, as an example. So if you can start to build some of those audience profiles on top, that's really going to help you. And then in the B2B example, you might then start to say that your piece of software is really relevant to people in the healthcare industry. So then you start to build a vertical audience. So you're looking at people who are head of IT, but within the healthcare organizations, as an example. So it can be really useful exercise to start to map out those segments. Taking this a step further, so this was from 2014, but it's still really relevant, is Visit Scotland's customer segmentation of people who visit Scotland from the UK. So down the left-hand side, you'll see that they came up with 5 different types of people that are key targets to visit Scotland. So you've got the adventure seekers, curious travellers, engaged sightseers, food-loving culturalists, and natural advocates. And then within each of those, Visit Scotland has created a really detailed profile that tells us where these people are most likely to stay. Are they going to be in hotels or self-catering? And then for the example given here of curious travellers, we've asked their how long is their holiday usually. And when you've got this really detailed profile of who you think you're trying to target with your message, it becomes much easier to shape that message and to deliver it correctly to the right people at the right time. So for the curious travellers, it's really about targeting them with the short breaks of 1 to 6 nights, which is what makes up 69% of their travel. And it's probably much more focused on hotels, because we know that 67% of their stays are in hotels. So once you start to put this down on paper and map it out, it gives you real direction to your communication. Moving on to market insights. a lot of the market insights can be found in similar places to audience insights, but then there's some other places you can look as well. So obviously industry statistics are useful, trend spotters and futurologists. So looking at maybe Googling, you know, what's going to happen in my industry in 2050 or 2030 even, to try and get some feeling of where people think the industry might be going. Trade magazines, really useful. So it could be your own industry. So for me, I work in PR and I want to understand from PR Week what people are saying is going to be changing in my industry. But then we also do a lot of work in the food and drink sector. So at the same time, I'm also reading The Grocer and I'm trying to understand food and drink trends so that I can react to those as well. And if you can combine your own industry and the industries of your customer, if that's something different, that's going to give you real market insight. Also following thought leaders. So maybe that's via LinkedIn and just understanding what the thought leaders in your industry are predicting and what are they talking about, and potentially even speaking to some of them. And also events and trade shows. Obviously we're all a bit restricted just now, but quite a lot of these events are going online. There's quite a lot of webinar content out there. Maybe looking at investors within your sector and seeing what their kind of trends are. And a lot of the other topics were probably covered off already around the audience insights. And going back to Visit Scotland, because I think this is something that they do really well. There's 3 trends that they identified for 2019 and they called them mega trends. So we'd encourage you to start thinking about what the mega trends are within your industry and where's it going and where's the opportunity for you. So the way that Visit Scotland has broken these down is the art of now. And there's some really good headings here that you might want to apply to your sector, or you might want to create your own headings and make them really tailored to your needs. But for Visit Scotland, they've looked at the basic need. So what is it that the consumer needs here? Was it convenience, value for money? Then they've looked at drivers for change. So what's causing this change and what's creating this trend? And that's things like connectivity and valuing experience over possessions. Then you've got the emerging consumer expectation. So that's, you know, how do we satisfy the trend? What is it that this new consumer is looking for? And then there's some inspiration there. So we talked earlier about looking at adjacent sectors. Maybe you could think about some adjacent sectors or some friendly competitors and start to detail out how other people are responding to this mega trend. So the Visit Scotland examples are the art of now, sensory tourism, and then new society norms. And by blending the mega trends which are coming out from the industry and outside world, from blending those together with the audience insights, that's really where the golden egg comes from. I'm going to show a couple of videos now, just giving some real examples of where we think insights have been particularly strong. So the first one is Brewdog and equity for punks. And we've gone for the original video that they launched back in 2009. So it's 11 years old and you can see that it's a bit dated, but it does just show you in a real raw way what they were trying to do. And the great thing here is they understood their audience. They created a segment and they've really gone after that audience over the years. And 11 years on, they're still talking about equity for punks. It's still really important to them. And not only have they raised funds through their customers directly by bringing people on board, but they've created ambassadors all around the world who only drink Brewdog because they feel like they are equity holders, they're shareholders, and they're really, really engaged with the brand. So this is the video they used to launch that.
Since we started in April 2007, we've now grown over 2,000%. We've produced over 300,000 bottles of beer per month and are the largest independent brewery in Scotland.
We are looking for brewdog loving individuals to purchase shares in our company. You to run a piece of the brewery which is redefining the UK beer market. This is something much bigger than an intelligent investment.
You're buying into an ideal, a philosophy, a vision.
This is a cool gig. Let's rock it out together.
Our marketing strategy has always been to shorten the distance as much as possible between ourselves and the people who enjoy our beers. Equity for Punks is the ultimate incarnation of this philosophy.
Brewdog is about breaking rules, taking risks, upsetting trends and unsettling institutions. But first and foremost, great tasting beer.
With our great customer base, strong growth, rock-solid financials and exceptionally talented management team, the prospects for Brewdog PLC look fantastic.
This is a journey and a future we want you to be part of.
So a great example there of really understanding your niche, understanding your audience, and digging in and really going very focused. So they've targeted themselves 100% at punks, and that is exactly who they market themselves to. The next one is a real favourite of mine. It's called the Pedigree Child Replacement Programme. And again, I think it's just a really good example of when a brand has identified an insight and they haven't overcomplicated it. They've kept it really simple and they've just gone out and used the insight. So in this case, Pedigree identified that a key time that people get a dog is when their children leave home and go to university or move out into their first home. So rather than overcomplicate it, they've just gone out with this really straightforward message, which is, it's on the screen at the moment, when your kids leave home, replace them and replace them with a dog. So it's actually quite a simple concept. It's been delivered in a really creative and funny and engaging way. And it's incredibly focused in on an audience insight.
The bond between a parent and child can be really strong. And when a parent has focused on that child for so long, when that child leaves, the parent can just feel that there's such a great void and not know how to fill that void.
The Pedigree Child Replacement Program. When they move out, move on. Adopt a dog.
If your kids have left home, we have a solution for you.
Campaigners hope that empty nesters might find a suitable child replacement, a dog that needs a home.
If your kids have left home, why don't you just get a dog to replace them?
You replace your kids with a dog. How's that for your Monday morning?
You're encouraging people who are feeling a bit sad about having an empty nest to get a dog.
Go on, mate. Go get it. Yes. Yeah, go on. Go on.
I understand the website matches dogs with people. How do you work it out? Is there a science to it?
Parents enter their kids' details and the software will match those characteristics with a dog that's looking to be adopted.
I went onto that website and I matched with a beautiful Border Collie cross.
You send in your kids' old stuff and they turn it into dog stuff.
And this is on the website now. They've taken a kid's jacket and they've turned it into a dog jacket.
All that crap you left in your room when you moved out, guess what? It belongs to the dog now.
The Child Replacement Program finds that magic connection point between dogs that need homes and homes that need dogs. And we think that's why it's been so effective for us.
I've got to say, I laugh. What's the response been so far?
The Pedigree Child Replacement Program. When they move out, move on. Adopt.
So a really nice example there of how you can take an insight and build like a massive campaign that's got big legs and lots of longevity around it. And that was one of the shortlisted entries for the Marketing Society's awards, where they look at global kind of best campaigns. Really love that. And I think if you're thinking about insights and where you can identify things like life cycle and when things might happen and when your brand might become engaged with its audience, I think that's just an amazing example of how to do that. So now we're going to speak to Shruti Ahuja, who was the head of customer insights and analytics at Ralph Lauren, and also former group head of analytics and optimization at Haymarket Group. So I guess the first question is, what we're covering this week is insights and how marketeers and communicators can use insights better in their communication programs. So what I'd love to hear from you first of all is how you would define what an insight is.
Sure. So for me, an insight is a piece of information that can help transform a business section, or help make a decision, a smarter decision around a particular business function, be that marketing, be that sales, editorial, or the business overall. So it's going a bit beyond producing numbers and more about telling a story in terms of the how as opposed to the what.
Lovely. That sounds great. So as a starting point, maybe thinking about different brand experience that you've had in your career, where would you say is a good starting point when you're looking to find insights?
Sure. So for me, my approach with any company that I've worked with is start with an audit of the tools and the systems in place that are available to hand, and understand what data exists and what insights exist within the company at that moment in time. And then chart a plan for what the ideal actual insight would look like that would help a company move on a regular basis. So do they have dashboarding in place? Do they have reporting in place? Do they have effective communication of those insights with the various teams?
And do you have any examples maybe of what that insight might look like, how people might go about that once they've worked out what they're looking for?
Absolutely. So if we look at an example of even Ralph Lauren, while I was working with them, I joined, and as you can imagine, it's a luxury retail business. I was on the digital arm of things, so of course, insights are important. But when I joined, they were lacking. They felt they were lacking overall support from us as a function. They felt that we were more marketing analytics focused as a division and less focused on, say, the trade side of things, the strategy and planning and forecasting side of things, product insights kind of thing. So it's very much about taking a step back and making sure that we review everything we've had, and looking at things like, right, okay, so if we're looking at a funnel of our customer, we start off, if we're talking about insight, what is the insight of somebody who lands on our website, to then going from one step to reviewing products or viewing products, then to adding to cart, and then purchasing, but then also taking the step beyond and understanding how people return and the user behavior of people who want to return products, right? And one of the interesting conundrums we had is everybody wanted information in every single sector. So it was very much about tying those resources in. And one of the interesting insights we found is, for instance, social media. We had a lot of focus of getting people in from social media as a general channel, if we're talking about a marketing analytics point of view, but there was a very strong desire to understand what that actually means. So does that actually translate into purchasing or consumption by the consumer? And we found that, of course, as is largely reputed with social media, we were seeing a lot of traffic, a lot of noise, but less conversion. However, we went through a bit of a marketing attribution kind of analysis, and we understood that while people make a lot of noise, or social media accounts for a lot of noise, actually we're building brand awareness in the background. And even if not directly, then in the preceding months, we do see people coming back from that brand awareness that we create. So it was an interesting one because, that's a very debated hot topic. But that really helped us decide how we kind of pitch the various marketing channels against each other. So, at what point does social media come in? What point does PPC then come in to supplement that? And, how you can capture the consumer at various lines or points of purchase.
Amazing, yeah, really nice insight there. That's really interesting. So obviously that's Ralph Lauren. If you were looking at doing some insights on a budget, where would you recommend people start?
On a budget, very interesting. I think it depends, it starts with the business model. What does the business look to achieve? What are the objectives? And, what are the targets? And based on that, each business or each industry has their own breakdown. So, we can look at media and publishing, for instance. They have a huge advertising potential. I used to work for Haymarket Media Group. And over there, we had budget constraints. We had revenue declining from advertising as an industry in general, but that was one of the key pillars of media and publishing back then. And what we discovered was actually not to just focus on that, but diversify your revenue models. And if you can diversify your revenue models, the amount you spend on something such as advertising, you can save your costs over there and revisit other more promising areas like lead generation, or providing the data that you collect about users to relevant companies or relevant clients, obviously with the permission of the user, or with the consent of the user. But what that helps you do is spend less and bring in more revenue in different ways rather than just put all your eggs in one basket. That'd be one way. If we're looking at marketing, I'll give you an example where you understand attribution automatically. Once you understand the right marketing mix or model mix, you can diversify how you spend and become a bit more efficient with that. I guess another example I could give you is, again, at Haymarket Media Group, one of their flagship brands, they used to break even for quite a while. And the commercial director said to me, listen, my brand is supposed to be really, really great. It's strong, but I'm just breaking even. I need to be making profit. And turns out they had a classifieds platform that for cars, so used cars, which was competing with the likes of Gumtree and Autotrader, which, as you can imagine, have a mass reach. Whenever somebody wants to buy a used car, they automatically go to Autotrader. They don't necessarily think beyond that. And here was a small little flagship brand trying to compete with that. So went in, looked at the data, tried to understand what we're doing, what we're selling, what's important to the consumer, and soon realized that actually we had a niche of our own. People who purchased back then on Autotrader, the average sale of a car was about £2,000. And the average car that people were interested in on this brand was £55,000.
Yeah.
So it's like, so we had a huge nugget of our own, which we hadn't realized, and we were just spending away like crazy and designing the entire website based on this mass market as opposed to this this golden egg that we had of our own. And he kind of came back to me and said, are you sure about this? And I said, look, we can do a very simple test. Why don't we just showcase the top 10 cars that people are interested in on our website, on our top pages? And he was like, yeah, that sounds nice and simple and not too, earth-shattering. So we did that, and automatically we saw better engagement. And as a as a consequence of that, what happened was we were able to go back to our trade dealerships from who we used to get revenue, saying, listen, actually, we're giving you very, very high-profile consumers who are interested in a very high-value car. So we should be earning more for that than we are right now. And that completely changed the revenue model. So, it was a way of making sure that we were more efficient in our spend, but also we're more clever or smarter in the way that we're, in what we're asking for from the consumer using that data.
Super, that's a great example. Thank you very much for sharing that one. I guess just to close off, what would be the top piece of advice you would give people who are looking to maybe get started with insights?
I think the most important thing is, having a passion for insights, and a keen eye for detail. I think while that sounds very cliche, it's so important. You need to be analytical. You need to learn to think outside the box. But most importantly, you need to realize that while it's good to have, you must be at the top of the industry's innovation. So keep learning. You need to make sure that you understand what's new in the market, because there's something or the other every day that comes out, which is, reshaping the data industry. Be that, a big data, which is, a very strong aspect to it. There's data science, which is becoming quite an area of expansion at the moment. But also alongside that, what you need to make sure is, no matter how much data, you must have a focus on building data, but more importantly, you need to be able to have a focus on understanding and digesting that data. Because if you can't find, what you mean, let me just reword that. What you need to be able to do is be able to tell the business that you're working for what that data means. So you can have all the terabytes worth of data you have, but it must tell a story. And I think as long as you're able to be focused on the bigger picture and keep reminding yourself not to get too bogged down with the data that you have, then you're in a fantastic place. So I would say that's my starting point. And I would say start off by, looking at data sets for fun. If you haven't broken into the industry yet, see if you can volunteer and, get some experience, hands-on experience within that framework, and see what it can help you with.
Oh, fantastic. Well, some really good insights there into insights, I think. So thank you so much for your time. So thanks to Shruti for all that insight and amazing experience that she brought to us there. And I guess to wrap up this week's content, there's some real benefits to using insights. First of all, you have much more focused campaigns that are going to reach the right audience with the right message at the right time. So you really do need to be using insights. If you're not, you can't not. It's so important. I think it brings real clarity to communication plans, and it can also act as a critical friend to the communications team. So earlier on, we talked about personas. If you have Sally, that's your persona, then whenever you're doing anything, if you're looking at creative, if you're launching a new comms campaign, you can be thinking, what would Sally think of this? Would Sally like this? Would this engage Sally? So personas can be really helpful. If you do get the insights right, it can also cross over into thought leadership. Obviously, it guides the messaging. And where you're really smart about it, like I guess the BrewDog example that we had earlier, it can have a big impact all the way up the organisation. So it can really help you to show the value that your team brings within the organisation. Finally, I guess thinking about digital these days, if you understand your audience, you're going to be able to profile your paid for audiences so much better. So once you really understand your audience, then you'll be able to do the profiling better. And as I said at the beginning, I just think these days you can't not understand your audience. If you don't, you should really go back to the beginning, start again, build out your insights, and then build your campaign on top. Otherwise, you're kind of in the dark. And I think there are so many data sets and so much information out there at the moment that it really shouldn't be expensive. It shouldn't cost a lot. It shouldn't take a lot of time to build a really basic set of insights. In terms of homework, so we did provide the analytics, the diagnostic tool that we use, where we've got the sort of 5 questions about insights. So I think following this call, it would be really good for you to go away and think about your organisation and think about those 5 questions and how you feel you map against those, and also mark on there where you'd like to get to, so that you can start trying to think about improving your score there if there is room for improvement. And going back to what Shruti said about the best place to start really being an audit, I would definitely recommend carrying an audit out, really understanding what insights are available within your organisation, and then identifying and filling any gaps that there might be. And then just thinking about how you can build upon the insights you have. So if you're a big organization and you have some really good data already, think about how you can improve it. Think about how it might have changed given the way the world's changed over the past 6 months. Or maybe think about any new products or services that might be coming to market and whether they fit with the traditional audience that you are already targeting. As I said at the beginning, I feel like audience and insights is never finished. It's never something that is 100% fixed, set in stone, and not reviewed a week later, because the world changes so much, so fast. So you can always build upon this, I would say. And then from there, hopefully you'll be able to find your golden eggs so that you have a really clear insight that you can take forward and build strategy around. Next week's session, we're going to be talking about strategy. We're going to have a really good speaker there on video talking about strategy as well and how they've applied strategy to their campaigns. We do still have space, so if anybody else wants to bring a colleague along, or if you know anybody else that might be interested in joining CommsCamp, then just let them know. You could send on the Eventbrite link to them. And yeah, we're really looking forward to seeing you again next week. And we do have a closed group in Facebook. If you're interested, feel free to join that. And we'll send around some more worksheets in the meantime. There's 2 pages of worksheet for the insight session today. So the left-hand side focusing on your audience and the right-hand side looking at the market. They do cross over as well. So really interested in thinking, finding out your thinking on those 2 worksheets. And I think as well, it'd be good to think about your own sector. So we've tried to make this speak to everybody, but I'm sure there'll be some specific stuff that you can get for your sector that's maybe not covered by the broad titles that we've provided. But in the meantime, we'd love some feedback. We'd love to understand if this is working for you, and any feedback you have, any questions you have as well for next week would be really appreciated. Thank you. Bye.